The coming of the railway. The long period of slow growth and of stagnation for Los Angeles was now at an end. It had taken 90 years to accumulate a population of 5,000, and in the next succeeding score of years, a marvelous transformation was to take place. The changes of the first decade, that from 1870 to 1880, were not entirely unexpected. Those of the second, from 1880 to 1890, exceeded the wildest prophecies. That the building of a railway into Los Angeles connecting it with the eastern states should cause its population to increase 100% was not surprising. But that the building of a second road should cause the increased number to multiply 500%, a total advance from 5,000 to 50,000 in 20 years, or from 5,000 to over 100,000 in 30 years, that was a marvel that no one could be expected to foresee. The immediate success that was achieved by the railroad from Wilmington to the city, not only in the freight and passengers it carried, but also in the impetus it gave to numerous lines of industry in the county, encouraged the people of this region to cast about for further opportunities of the same kind. The famous railway operator Thomas A. Scott, who was pushing out into the southwest across Texas, had projected a line through California from Yuma to San Diego. He proposed to bring this north along the coast if suitable inducements were offered by Los Angeles. At the same time, the owners of the Central Pacific were building southward, and by 1872 were well down into the San Joaquin Valley. That region of the state already contained a number of settlements or towns, some of which numbered from 500 to 1,000 people. As the road drew near these, it demanded a free right-of-way and in most cases a bonus of some description. Where this was refused, the line was run some distance from the town and a new population center established. Most of the towns thus abandoned were ruined or were compelled to move bodily to the new location. Two exceptions to the rule were Bakersfield and Visalia, which have managed to hold their own in spite of the snub. It must not be supposed that the policy of the road in this matter contained any element of malevolence. The issue was one of business, the question for the town to determine being whether it needed the road, and for the road whether it needed the town. The people of Los Angeles had the object lesson of the San Joaquin Valley towns before them, when the railroad reached the mountains at the southern end of that region and paused to ask what the ancient Pueblo would do. Did the people of Los Angeles desire the railway connection with San Francisco in the east sufficiently to be willing to pay 5% of the assessed valuation of all land and improvements in their county, or would they prefer to see the new road turn to the east along the mountains and pass Los Angeles by on the other side? 5% on the assessed valuation of $12 million would be $600,000. There was also an item of 60 acres to be given for depot purposes at some advantageous location within the city limits. As with the road to the waterfront, there was again great divergence of opinion. The Texas Pacific scheme of Scott was in the air, but had not been presented as yet in the form of a definite proposition. The Southern Pacific, on the other hand, was ready to begin work immediately. An understanding was reached between representatives of the railroad and the city that if the people would vote to ratify the plan, the city and county would give the stock that they held in the San Pedro line and donate the necessary 60 acres, and also issue 7% 20-year bonds in the sum of $377,000, making a total of $610,000 of subsidy. And in return for this, the railroad was to build down through the Soledad Canyon into the city and out to the east to San Bernardino to connect ultimately with the Texas Pacific at Yuma. To win the concurrence of the people of the southeastern part of the county, the region since set off to make Orange County. It was agreed that a branch line should be constructed to Anaheim. The matter was put to a vote after a year's active discussion in November 1872, and it carried by a good majority. There were many intelligent men and large taxpayers who declared that the county was hazarding all its future in this enormous obligation, but the dismal alternative of being left out of the railway development of the state compelled them to vote in favor of the bonds. Before half the period for which the securities were to run had elapsed, the county assessment had increased from $12 million to $35 million, and at the end of the 20 years, the valuation was nearly $100 million. The burden, therefore, did not prove to be very serious. The construction of a railway over the great Tehachapi Pass and through the mountains of San Fernando was a slow and laborious undertaking, and it was not until 4 years after the proposition carried that the trains began running between San Francisco and Los Angeles. The ceremony of driving the Golden Spike was held at Soledad September 6, 1876. 350 citizens of Los Angeles went up from the Pueblo to meet 50 residents of San Francisco, who came down to celebrate the union of the two cities. San Francisco was then a little larger than Los Angeles is at present, while Los Angeles was about the size of Pomona. There were speeches full of hope and good fellowship, and then the whole party repaired to Los Angeles, where a banquet was given at Union Hall in the Jones Block, at which a considerable amount of wine was consumed. The old Spanish Pueblo was at last in touch with the great American system of progress and activity. Scarcely was one road out into the world completed when agitation was begun for a second. This was to be known as the Los Angeles and Independence Railroad, with one terminus at Santa Monica, where it was believed a good harbor could be constructed, and the other at the town of Independence in Inyo County, the center of a district which was then believed to be of great promise, but which has never attained the expected development because of a lack of transportation facilities. It was confidently hoped that after this much of the road was built, it would go on to Salt Lake City. The largest stockholder was J.P. Jones, who afterwards became United States Senator from Nevada. Local capital was interested to some extent. The line from Santa Monica was constructed in 1875, and a substantial wharf was built at its ocean terminus. The hard times that swept over the country after the failure of Jay Cooke and the Black Friday episode made it impossible to secure funds to carry out the extension to the north, and the plan was abandoned. The Santa Monica branch was sold in 1878 to the Southern Pacific Company, which proceeded to take down the wharf as it interfered with the business at San Pedro. The immediate effect of all this railway projection and construction from the San Pedro line in 1869 through to the Southern Pacific connections and the Santa Monica line in 1875 and 1876 was to produce considerable activity in all forms of industrial development. As is usual in such cases, anticipation ran rather ahead of the actual event and was followed by depression when the extravagant hopes were not realized. The dry years and the unfavorable money conditions in the East helped to complicate matters. By the year 1875, the bank panic, which had been spreading across the country, struck Los Angeles. One of the banks, the Temple and Workman, was in an unsound condition, owing to the reckless and extravagant policy of its chief owner, F.P.F. Temple, who was a younger brother of John Temple. The other two were on a solid basis, but as the railway connection to San Francisco had not been established, and as it would take about a week to get word to the city and bring money back, it was agreed that all three should close their doors for a time. For two of the banks, this suspension was of brief duration, but for the Temple and Workman Bank, it was permanent, and the loss of the depositors was complete. This bad failure wrought serious demoralization to the development that was just beginning in Los Angeles, turning confidence and hope into doubt and discouragement. Nearly half a score of years passed before the evil effects of the disaster were entirely dispelled.